The human had never been anywhere like this before. The hall stretched higher than any building he had ever seen on Earth, with ceilings that vanished into mist and walls carved from a single glittering crystal that reflected light in impossible colors. Around him, creatures of every imaginable shape moved with purpose. Some had 6 arms, some no legs at all, and some floated on a faint glow that emanated from their translucent bodies. Every one of them was large, larger than him, larger than any human had any right to be. In comparison, he felt small, weak, and painfully ordinary. He adjusted the strap of the small satchel he carried, trying to appear confident, though his heart pounded in his chest. This was the Interstellar Assembly of the Grand Galactic Empire, a gathering that occurred once every 50 cycles. Representatives from dozens of worlds had traveled light years to attend, and humans were not known for attending. Humans were young, fragile, and generally ignored. The thought that he, a single human observer, would be noticed at all made him want to shrink further into himself. He scanned the enormous room for an empty seat, rows upon rows of elevated platforms, and long, sleek tables extended in all directions. Many of the seats were occupied by nobles with jagged crowns, glowing eyes, or multiple heads that whispered among themselves. He hoped to find one of the few empty chairs at the back, where he could quietly observe, take notes, and remain invisible. Being invisible was the safest thing a human could do in a hall full of beings who could crush him with one swipe of their massive claws or one flick of a tendril. Finally, he spotted a narrow gap at the end of a long table, far from the center. Relief flooded him. He began to step toward it, his careful movements drawing the attention of nobody, at least, so he thought. Then, everything changed. A hush fell over the hall. The air itself seemed to shiver, as though the room had taken a breath it had held for 1,000 years. Every being stopped moving. Conversations, discussions, and the soft hum of technology vanished. Even the floating lanterns above dimmed slightly, focusing light on a single figure at the head of the hall. The alien Empress. She was enormous, taller than anyone else in the room, with skin that shimmered in colors he could not name. Her eyes glowed faintly gold, piercing in their gaze. Long, elegant limbs ended in hands that seemed delicate, but could crush stone if she willed it. Around her, the air seemed to bend subtly, like reality itself respected her presence. When she looked at him, the human felt as if all the other creatures in the room had vanished. It was only her and him. Before he could even process the moment, she extended her hand toward him. It was a gesture so simple and yet so impossible that it seemed to slow time itself. And then she spoke, her voice clear and calm, echoing in the vast hall. "You sit with me." Her hand reached him before he had a chance to move. She grasped his hand firmly, the warmth from her palm shocking against his own. Every eye in the hall turned toward them. Whispers started almost immediately, first soft, then growing louder. The human froze, embarrassed. He was not used to attention, let alone attention from a being who could crush armies with a gesture. His mind raced. "I'm supposed to sit somewhere at the back. I don't belong here." Why me? Why would she? But she did not release him. She smiled faintly, a gesture so subtle it was almost invisible. Yet it made his heart pound faster. There was no malice in her gaze, no amusement, just an inscrutable calm, as if she had been expecting him all along. The human allowed himself to be led. As he moved, whispers turned to gasps, some mixed with disbelief, some with fear. No one had ever sat beside the Empress before, at least not willingly. Not generals, not rulers, not even her closest advisors. He was the first, and suddenly, the most visible being in the galaxy. When they reached the seat, he noticed its size. But, it was massive compared to him, as if made for someone of her stature. He climbed carefully, trying not to look foolish, and sat. His legs barely reached the floor. The Empress regarded him for a long moment, her fingers still brushing lightly against his hand. Then she withdrew, and he realized that the room had fallen completely silent. For the first time, he noticed the detail around him. The carvings on the walls depicted battles that had lasted centuries, victories, and defeats that spanned galaxies. The floor shimmered with a living metal that adjusted its surface as creatures walked over it. Above him, banners floated with no strings, their colors shifting in patterns he could not understand. Every detail shouted wealth, power, and history older than Earth itself. And in the center of it all was a human, trembling slightly, yet sitting beside the ruler of a galaxy-spanning empire. The assembly began. Other leaders stood, spoke, and gestured. The human tried to keep his mind focused, taking mental notes. But it was impossible to ignore the feeling of thousands of eyes on him. Some were curious, others scornful, a few clearly angry. A few whispered in languages he could not understand, their tones sharp, filled with resentment. A large six-armed general, his skin the color of molten bronze, leaned over and hissed something in a tongue the human barely understood. The human bowed slightly, hoping politeness would be enough. The general's gaze hardened, but he did not strike. It was clear that the human's presence alone was a puzzle, a challenge to their expectations. The Empress spoke again, her voice soft but audible even above the murmurs. "Observe, human. Learn what others cannot see." The human swallowed. He did not know why she had chosen him, why she had ignored protocol and tradition, but he felt an unexpected sense of purpose. He straightened in his chair, trying to hold himself with dignity, though his hands shook slightly. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed distorted in the hall. He watched as alien leaders debated territory, trade, and military strategy. He noticed patterns, connections between statements and gestures, subtle hints of deception that the other leaders either ignored or failed to detect. A small movement of an advisor's tentacle revealed a hidden alliance. The flicker of a glowing eye betrayed a lie. A shift in weight predicted an attack plan yet to be declared. The human made mental notes. He was not a diplomat. He was not a warrior. But he had eyes, ears, and a mind that could connect dots others missed. And the Empress noticed. She nodded once in approval, her gaze acknowledging his small observations in a way that no words could convey. Other humans would have panicked. They would have slunk back into obscurity. But this human felt alive. The danger made him sharper. The attention made him faster. And for the first time in his life, he felt that being human was not a weakness. It was a unique advantage. He noticed another detail. The Empress did not speak for him. She did not explain, defend, or intervene unless necessary. Instead, she allowed him to see, to hear, and to understand. He began to anticipate moves in the assembly before they happened. He realized the other leaders underestimated him because he was human, assuming that his race lacked strength, intelligence, or cunning. They were wrong. A challenge arose suddenly. A tall, armored ambassador from a distant system stood, pointing at him and laughing. His voice rumbled through the hall. "Why allow a child of a weak race to sit at the seat of power? Is this amusement or folly?" The human kept his calm. He did not flinch. He did not bow. Instead, he observed, noted the ambassador's stance, his breathing, the subtle twitch of his fingers. In that moment, he saw an opportunity not to answer with words, but with presence. His stillness, his quiet attention, became a statement. The Empress leaned slightly toward him, just enough that only he could notice. Her eyes glimmered, and she whispered words only he could hear. "Do not react hastily. Observe. Humanity thrives where others stumble." He nodded ever so slightly, though no one else could see. And in that silent nod, a strange confidence began to grow. He was not a ruler. He was not a soldier. He was human. And humans had something no alien army could replicate: adaptability, curiosity, and the willingness to survive against impossible odds. By the end of the first cycle of speeches, the human had already noticed multiple plans of deception, alliances being secretly formed, and subtle power shifts that even veteran leaders seemed unaware of. The Empress made no comments in front of others, but her slight, approving glances confirmed what he was beginning to understand. His observations mattered. They were being noted. When the first break came, the human rose with the Empress, careful not to stumble. She walked beside him with grace, her presence dominating the hall, yet oddly protective toward him. Leaders whispered as they passed, some in envy, some in fear, and others in disbelief. A human, so small, so ordinary, had the attention of the greatest power in the galaxy. He realized then that a simple empty seat had changed everything. By sitting beside the Empress, he had entered a world where strength was measured differently, not by size or claws or fleets of warships, but by intelligence, observation, and courage under scrutiny. As he followed her through the crystal corridors to the private chambers, he could not help but wonder what had drawn her to him. Was it chance? Fate? Or had the galaxy simply been waiting for a human to finally show that they could match the stars themselves, not in strength, but in mind? Whatever the reason, he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Sitting in that seat beside the alien Empress would change him, and perhaps the galaxy itself, forever. The hall had returned to its normal rhythm, but the human could feel the subtle tension lingering in the air. Whispers trailed behind him like shadows, following every step he took beside the alien Empress. He noticed the eyes of alien leaders tracking him, calculating, measuring, testing. Some were scowls, others curious, and a few were edged with genuine fear. It was difficult to understand fear on creatures who could crush planets with fleets of warships, yet it was unmistakable. He, a single human, had managed to unsettle them. The Empress led him down a narrow corridor that widened into a small observation chamber. From here they could see the entire assembly hall, elevated and distant, like looking down on an anthill. The human struggled to comprehend the scale. The floor shimmered with flowing metal. Alien glyphs etched themselves into the walls in a language he could not read, and holographic screens floated midair, displaying real-time movements of ships, armies, and the positions of hundreds of worlds. "Observe," the Empress said quietly, her eyes fixed on the hall below. "They underestimate you."
That is why they will reveal their plans without caution. Humans have the advantage when others are blind to your presence.
He nodded, taking in every movement. The alien leaders were more predictable than they appeared, each acting according to long-standing cultural rules, traditions, and rivalries. Subtle gestures, an extra flick of a hand, a sideways glance, a slight pause in speech, hinted at hidden agreements, secret alliances, and betrayals waiting to unfold. The human's mind raced. His observations were rapid, connections forming like sparks in his brain. An older leader, covered in golden scales, leaned toward a younger diplomat, whispering. Their words were indistinct, but their body language told a story. The younger diplomat's fingers trembled. The golden leader's gaze flicked toward the Empress repeatedly. Something was wrong. There was a secret, and the human could feel it.
"You see it?"
the Empress asked, her voice almost a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through the hum of machinery and distant voices. "Yes," he replied carefully. "They are trying to form a coalition against you. I think it involves 2 other star systems, one in the northern quadrant, another in the outer rim. They are testing loyalty, and they assume I cannot see it." The Empress's lips curved into the faintest smile. "And yet, you do." They watched for several cycles. Every move of every diplomat, every word spoken, every gesture became a thread in a larger web. The human noted the hidden patterns, realizing that he could predict actions even before they happened. He did not speak, for speaking would reveal his knowledge prematurely. Instead, he observed, recorded, and calculated silently. Minutes later, a commotion erupted in the hall. A massive envoy from a distant system stood, towering over the others, its 4 arms flaring outward in a gesture of authority. Its voice, amplified by technology, boomed across the chamber. "This human is not to be trusted. Your Majesty, he is a spy, a pawn, sent by another empire. We cannot allow him to sit beside you." The assembly froze. The human felt the sudden weight of every eye turning toward him. The alien species surrounding him muttered among themselves, their words harsh and sharp. He could feel the tension in the air as it thickened like mist. The Empress did not flinch. She leaned slightly toward him, her gaze unwavering. "He is not your concern," she said. Her voice carried the authority of centuries, calm and precise. "You will speak only when I allow it. This human sees what you cannot, and that is enough." The human realized then that he had a choice: panic or remain steady. He chose the latter. Heart pounding, palms slightly damp, he forced himself to focus. He noticed something that no one else did. The envoy's 4 arms were not arranged naturally. One was slightly raised, a hand subtly clenched. The envoy's weight shifted slightly toward the left, and its eyes flickered, not at him, but at a figure behind another leader. That movement revealed a second actor, hidden in the shadows, trying to manipulate the assembly for personal gain. He leaned slightly toward the Empress. "It's a trap," he whispered. "They're trying to manipulate votes in secret. If the assembly proceeds as they plan, your influence will weaken before this meeting even ends." Her eyes gleamed.
"Go on."
He took a deep breath. "The envoy is working with the Northern Coalition. They've coordinated signals to control certain votes. Their plan is predictable if we act quickly. A few strategic interventions will prevent their scheme from succeeding, and we can even turn it to your advantage." The Empress tilted her head slightly, intrigued. "How would you suggest we intervene?" He outlined the strategy, simple yet effective. Subtle shifts in seating arrangements, timing interventions to reveal hidden alliances, and using the Assembly's own rules against them. His plan did not involve force, armies, or threats. It relied purely on observation, intelligence, and timing. She listened carefully, nodding ever so slightly. "It is risky," she said. "But I see now that risk is your ally. Your species understands it in ways others do not." The human hesitated. "It could backfire. If they notice, it might provoke retaliation." "They will notice nothing," she said firmly. "Proceed." The next cycle of the assembly began, and the human's plan went into motion. He whispered small instructions to the Empress at the right moments, pointing out subtle gestures, signaling hidden alliances, and suggesting when to interject. Each step was calculated, each movement precise. The other leaders continued their debates, unaware that their carefully laid schemes were being unraveled in real time by the quiet human at the Empress's side. Hours passed. The hall's atmosphere shifted subtly. Some leaders began to frown. Others glanced nervously at one another. They could sense the failure of their manipulations, though they could not understand why. Whispers started, faint at first, growing louder as confusion spread. The human noticed every flicker of doubt, every twitch of hesitation. He remained calm, steady, and observant. Then, a sudden interruption. One of the Northern Coalition leaders attempted to call for a vote, hoping to push through a secret resolution that would diminish the Empress's authority. Every creature in the hall expected a swift, crushing rejection. The human recognized the danger. If the resolution passed, even by a small margin, it could destabilize her rule for cycles to come. He leaned toward the Empress, whispering a precise countermeasure. Subtle gestures to shift loyalty, a carefully timed reveal of hidden alliances, and the deployment of information no one had thought to notice. The plan was delicate. A single mistake could expose him. But the Empress did not hesitate. She followed his instructions with fluid grace, her authority unquestioned. Every action synchronized perfectly. Leaders shifted positions, votes changed, and the coalition's attempt collapsed before it had even started. The hall erupted, not in anger, but in stunned silence. The Northern envoy's forearms flailed briefly, then lowered, its expression unreadable. The human felt a thrill he had never known. He had helped avert disaster, using nothing but observation, intelligence, and courage. Around him, the Empress remained calm, her gaze approving, yet unreadable. She did not praise him aloud, but the slight tilt of her head and the glimmer in her eyes said more than words could. The aftermath was electric. Leaders whispered to one another, trying to understand what had just occurred. Some began to treat the human with newfound caution, while others regarded him with suspicion. They had underestimated him, assuming that humanity was weak, limited, and predictable. Now they realized they had been wrong. The Empress stood, and the human rose beside her. Together they left the assembly hall, their presence commanding attention as they passed. Whispers followed them like shadows, a mixture of fear, respect, and disbelief. A human, sitting quietly at her side, had just altered the course of galactic politics. In the corridors beyond the assembly, the Empress finally spoke in private. "You did well," she said softly. "I could see their schemes, because you noticed the small details I would have missed. Humans are unpredictable in ways that are valuable." The human exhaled, relief flooding him. "I was just observing," he said. I didn't think it would actually work." "Observation is the most powerful weapon," she replied, her voice calm but heavy with meaning. "It is rare to find someone who can see without interfering, who can act only when necessary. You are rare." He felt a mixture of pride and unease. Rare. The word made him realize that in this hall of giants, he was not only different, he was noticed, needed, and perhaps even respected. For the first time, being human felt like a strength rather than a limitation. They walked in silence for several cycles, passing through corridors lined with artifacts and relics from hundreds of civilizations. Statues of past rulers loomed over them, and paintings depicted wars that had spanned galaxies. The human's mind raced with questions. Why him? Why trust a single human in a room full of masters? The Empress seemed to sense his thoughts. "You will learn in time," she said. "For now, your presence alone is enough. Let the others speak. Let them reveal their secrets. Observe, and the truth will always show itself." He nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Being beside her was no longer about avoiding notice. It was about survival, strategy, and understanding the rules of a game he had never imagined playing. And yet, for the first time, he felt capable. Humans were not strong, but they were clever. Humans were not large, but they were adaptable. And humans, as he was learning, could influence events far beyond what anyone expected. By the time they reached the private chamber, the human realized something important. The galaxy was vast, full of danger, deceit, and ambition. But he was not invisible anymore. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was exactly what the Empress wanted him to be. As he looked out over the hall one last time, he understood that being human was no longer a disadvantage. It was a weapon. And sitting beside the alien Empress, he was learning how to wield it. The calm that had settled over the assembly hall was shattered within moments. Alarms blared across the city-sized palace, and lights flashed in urgent red patterns. Outside, massive warships hung in orbit, shifting into threatening positions. The human barely had time to react before the Empress's security officers rushed past him, their limbs moving faster than anything he had ever seen, carrying weapons that could pulverize steel in seconds. Sir, stay close, the Empress said, her voice sharp and commanding, yet calm enough to make him feel steady. This is not a drill. They have moved too quickly, and someone inside is helping them. The human's mind spun. He had expected tension, politicking, and subtle manipulations, but not open hostility. And yet, the hull that had seemed untouchable now trembled under a threat that was both external and internal. A rival faction had chosen this exact moment to strike, and their plan was clever. Simultaneous attacks from the fleet outside and covert sabotage within the assembly hall. As they reached a secure observation chamber, the Empress gestured for him to stand beside her. Her presence alone commanded authority, yet she did not hide the fear and urgency in her eyes. For the first time, he saw vulnerability in her, a subtle tension in her stance, the faint flare of nerves beneath the composed exterior. "They assume I cannot respond fast enough," she said quietly. "They are wrong, but your eyes may be the key." The human swallowed hard. This was more than observation. This was survival. His, hers, and perhaps that of the entire empire. He had no weapons, no armies, no advanced technology of his own. All he had was his mind, his ability to notice what others overlooked. He turned his attention to the assembly below. Immediately, patterns emerged. A small group of diplomats had begun moving toward the central control consoles, trying to access the voting and communication systems to spread confusion. Their gestures were subtle, almost invisible, but he noticed the irregular rhythm of their movements. One was slightly out of sync with protocol. Another cast a glance toward the Empress, before pretending to check a display. "They're working together," he whispered. "A few of them control information channels. If they succeed, they can manipulate the assembly votes and broadcast false orders to your fleet." The Empress nodded, her gaze intense. "And what do you suggest we do?" He took a deep breath. "We need to expose them without letting the rest of the assembly panic. The key is timing. If we reveal them too soon, the others may rally in chaos. If we wait too long, the sabotage succeeds. I can predict their next moves, and with small interventions, we can neutralize the threat." Her eyes gleamed. "Do it." "Your plan? I trust you. I am your—" The human moved quickly, whispering instructions at precise intervals. He indicated which officers should reposition subtly, which holographic displays should be adjusted to reveal anomalies, and when to divert attention from one diplomat to another. Each step required precision and nerve. He had never done anything like this before, yet every decision felt instinctive. Minutes later, the first sign of success appeared. A diplomat, unaware that their movements were being watched, triggered an alert by stepping onto the wrong tile at the console. The system recognized the anomaly, and the room's lighting shifted, highlighting their location. The other conspirators froze, realizing that something was amiss. The Empress moved with fluid authority, intercepting the immediate threat while keeping the rest of the assembly calm. She addressed the hall in her commanding voice, acknowledging the minor disruption as a technical error. Her calm tone reassured most of the assembly, but the human knew that the conspirators had no idea that they had been discovered. "They still believe they are in control," he whispered. "We need the next step to ensure they cannot recover." He instructed subtle movements of security forces, slight delays in communications, and small signals that only he and the Empress could understand. By manipulating the environment without overt force, they cornered the conspirators. One by one, they were revealed, their plans foiled before any damage occurred. The Empress's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. "You are extraordinary," she said quietly, almost to herself. Few could see so clearly, and fewer could act without hesitation. The human shook his head, disbelief still running through him. "I just noticed what others were missing. That's all." "You noticed," she said, her voice firm. "That is more than enough. Observation is power. Intelligence is power. You have both. And that makes you a threat to anyone who underestimates humans. The human felt a mixture of pride and unease. He had prevented a disaster, yet the scale of what he had witnessed terrified him. The galaxy was filled with cunning, deceit, and ambition beyond anything humans had experienced on Earth. And he, a single human, had stepped into that web. But the Empress seemed to sense his hesitation. "Fear is natural," she said. "Use it to sharpen your mind. Do not let it paralyze you. Humans are fragile physically, yes, but fragile is not weak."
You adapt. You notice.
You survive. That is strength others lack.
Hours passed as they managed the aftermath of the sabotage attempt. The humans' sharp observation revealed even more hidden schemes. Subtle manipulations of resources, secret communications intended to mislead the fleet, and alliances forming in the shadows. The Empress allowed him to act, to suggest interventions, always trusting his judgment. Through it all, he realized something remarkable. Humans had a unique advantage: patience. While alien species relied on intimidation, physical dominance, or overwhelming displays of power, humans could observe, analyze, and plan in silence. In a room where every gesture had meaning and every word could conceal a trap, patience and attention became lethal weapons. By the end of the cycle, the assembly was secure. The conspirators were exposed and contained, their influence nullified without bloodshed. Alien leaders whispered among themselves, unsure how a single human had influenced the outcome so decisively. The Northern Coalition's envoy avoided his gaze, their arrogance replaced with cautious respect, or perhaps fear. The Empress turned to him once the hall had quieted. "You acted swiftly and without hesitation. Few could do that under pressure. You are remarkable." He shook his head, feeling the enormity of what had happened. I noticed patterns. I predicted their moves, that's all." "No," she said firmly, placing a hand briefly on his shoulder. "You acted. Intelligence alone does nothing if not applied. You applied it when it mattered most. You saved this assembly, and perhaps the Empire itself. Humans are underestimated because others see only physical strength, but intelligence and courage are just as powerful, sometimes more." The human swallowed hard. He felt a mix of disbelief and pride. All his life he had been small, weak, and underestimated. And now, a galaxy full of beings far larger, stronger, and more experienced than him had witnessed the value of humanity. As the day ended, the Empress escorted him back to the private chambers. Outside, the palace continued its normal rhythm, unaware of the narrowly avoided disaster. She allowed him a moment to rest, to reflect, and then spoke again. "The galaxy underestimates your kind," she said softly. "They will continue to do so. That is why you must continue to observe, continue to act when necessary, and trust your instincts. Humans are fragile, yes, but you have a strength they cannot measure. They will never understand it, but you will wield it." He nodded slowly, realizing that his place beside the Empress was no longer accidental. It was strategic, necessary, and perhaps inevitable. Being human was no longer a limitation. It was a gift. The Empress continued, "Do not seek recognition. Do not seek glory. Observe, act, and survive. That is the human way, and that is why you are here, beside me, at this moment. The galaxy will test you endlessly. You will face challenges far beyond what you have seen today. But remember this: humanity's greatest weapon is its mind, and yours is sharper than most can imagine." He looked at her, words failing him. For the first time in his life, he felt a sense of belonging, not because he was like her or like the other leaders, but because he had something they lacked. Humans could think in ways others could not. They could adapt. They could survive. They could, in subtle ways, shape the fate of the galaxy. And in that moment, he understood a simple truth. Being human had never been a disadvantage. It had been a hidden strength all along. As night fell over the palace, the human sat quietly in the private chamber, reflecting on the day's events. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy and the challenges yet to come. And yet, for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever schemes, threats, or betrayals awaited, ready to prove that humanity, small and fragile though it seemed, could stand beside the mightiest of empires and make a difference. The galaxy had tested him. He had survived. And as he sat beside the alien Empress, he knew one thing clearly. Humans did not need armies or weapons to influence the galaxy. All they needed was a mind, courage, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. And the human had all three. The human woke before dawn, the first light of the alien suns filtering through the high crystal windows of the Empress's private chambers. He had barely slept. Even though the immediate threat had been neutralized, his mind was restless. The galaxy was vast, filled with danger, cunning, and ambitions that spanned entire star systems. He understood now that sitting beside the Empress was not a privilege, it was a responsibility. The Empress entered the chamber silently, her presence commanding attention even in the soft morning glow. Her eyes met his, calm and unreadable. "It begins again today," she said. "The Northern Coalition will attempt to regain influence. Their failure yesterday will not deter them, but it will make them careless. They assume you are inexperienced. They are wrong." He nodded, his stomach tightening. This was more than politics. This was strategy, observation, and survival all at once. And he realized that, for the first time in his life, he was not just watching history, he was shaping it. They arrived at the assembly hall together, and the difference was palpable. Alien leaders whispered as they passed, cautious glances following him wherever he went. Even those who had dismissed him before now regarded him with hesitation. The human felt the weight of their scrutiny, but instead of fear, he drew strength from it. Humans may have been small, fragile, and underestimated, but that meant others never anticipated what they were capable of. The Empress sat at her central seat, and the human took his place beside her, his posture steady. The assembly began, but this time the rival faction was ready. Their representatives moved with precision, their voices carefully measured, and their gestures calculated to create confusion and doubt. Their plan was subtle: sow disagreement among the leaders, manipulate votes, and create a sense of chaos that would weaken the Empress's influence. The human observed everything. Each flick of an eye, each subtle tilt of a hand, each hesitant pause became a clue. He had learned the rhythms of this assembly, the unspoken rules that governed every interaction, and the secret alliances that held sway beneath the surface. He noticed patterns where others saw chaos, and in those patterns, he found the weaknesses. He whispered instructions to the Empress at the right moments, small, almost imperceptible suggestions, subtle corrections in the seating, carefully timed interventions in the discussions, and hints to loyal allies to reveal hidden information. Her responses were equally subtle. A nod here, a shift in tone there, all perfectly synchronized with his observations. The rival faction attempted to exploit a loophole in the assembly rules, but the human had anticipated it. He directed the Empress to subtly shift the timing of votes and discussions, exposing the conspirators' plan without alarming the rest of the assembly. One by one, the faction's attempts to manipulate the meeting unraveled. Leaders realized too late that they had been outmaneuvered not through force, but through intelligence and timing. Whispers of disbelief rippled through the hall. Aliens who had once dismissed humanity now studied him with cautious respect. They could not understand how a single human, physically insignificant compared to the towering rulers around him, could exert influence over events that determined the fate of entire worlds. Yet the proof was undeniable. The assembly had been secured, the rival faction's plots foiled, and the Empress's authority remained unchallenged. The human felt a surge of confidence. He had always been underestimated, overlooked and dismissed. Now, he realized, being human was not a weakness. It was a weapon. He had learned to see patterns where others could not, to anticipate moves before they happened, and to act decisively when the moment required it. As the day progressed, the Empress stood and addressed the assembly. Her voice carried the authority of a ruler who had survived countless challenges and triumphed over countless enemies. She praised the resolution of the conflicts, subtly highlighting the importance of keen observation and strategic thinking. Without naming him, she acknowledged the human contribution in a way that was unmistakable to those who could see it. The human remained seated beside her, aware that the eyes of the entire galaxy were on him. Some leaders scowled, realizing that their plans had been foiled by someone they had once considered insignificant. Others regarded him with admiration, recognizing that intelligence and courage could triumph over brute strength and ancient alliances. After the assembly concluded, the Empress took him aside in the private chambers. She looked at him with a mixture of respect and something he could not name. "You have done more than observe," she said. "You have shaped the outcome of today." "That is a rare gift. I just noticed what was happening," he said, humility mixing with disbelief. I didn't think I could make a difference." "You did," she said firmly. "Humans are underestimated because others cannot see the subtle power of observation, reasoning, and courage. Today, you proved that your kind can influence events that others believe are beyond them. That is why you sit here beside me. That is why you matter." He felt a strange pride swell within him. All his life, humans had been regarded as fragile, short-lived, and physically weak. Yet here he was, recognized by one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy as someone whose mind could rival, and even surpass, the cunning of the oldest and strongest civilizations. The following days were filled with diplomacy, negotiations, and careful management of alliances. The human continued to act as an observer and advisor, subtly guiding discussions and revealing hidden truths. He discovered that the galaxy, vast as it was, could be influenced by those who understood it deeply, those who noticed details others overlooked. One evening, the Empress summoned him to the balcony overlooking the central plaza of the palace. Hundreds of ships orbited above, each a testament to the Empire's power, yet he felt no fear. Instead, he felt clarity. "You understand now," she said, her voice calm but filled with weight, "why you were chosen to sit beside me. Not because you are human, not because your species is fragile, but because you think differently, see differently, and act differently. That is power." He nodded slowly. "I see it now. Humans, we survive not because we are the strongest, but because we notice, adapt, and act when needed. That can be more powerful than fleets, armies, or even empires." The Empress smiled, faintly. "Yes, and that is why the galaxy will respect your kind in ways it has not yet imagined. Because you have shown that intelligence, courage, and observation can triumph over raw strength and tradition. You are a reminder to all that weakness is often misunderstood, and strength comes in many forms." He felt a sense of purpose settle within him. Being human had never been a disadvantage. It had been his greatest weapon. And now, sitting beside the alien Empress, he realized that the galaxy had changed. Alliances would shift, empires would reconsider their assumptions, and humans would be seen not as fragile observers, but as vital players in a universe that had long underestimated them. The Empress turned her gaze to him once more.
"The galaxy will test you endlessly.
But remember this, your strength lies not in your body, but in your mind, your courage, and your humanity. You are exactly where you are meant to be." He looked at her, understanding fully for the first time that he had been given a seat not just beside the Empress, but in history. A single human, unnoticed and underestimated, had become a force capable of shaping the galaxy, not through might, but through intelligence, observation, and unwavering courage. As the twin suns set beyond the horizon, Casting light across the crystal palace, he realized that the galaxy had changed forever. Not because of wars, not because of conquest, but because a human had dared to sit in a place where others believed he did not belong, and in doing so had proven that humanity's greatest strength was always its mind, its will, and its courage. The human knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers, secrets, and endless possibilities. But he was ready. He was human, and that was more than enough. And so he remained at her side, not as a servant, not as a symbol, but as a mind capable of seeing what others could not, of acting when it mattered most, and of showing the galaxy that humanity, small, fragile, underestimated, could stand beside the mightiest empires and change the course of history. The seat that had once seemed empty had become the fulcrum of a new era, and the human, quietly, thoughtfully, and without fanfare, had claimed it.